Good afternoon to you all. And a very warm welcome also to our online audience, those who are streaming and following this event live. My name is Vivian Atakos. I work with the CGIAR Agenda Equality Accelerator. And today we are excited to be here in Belém at the Food and Agriculture Pavilion. We are going to discuss moving towards a transformative gender action plan at COP30. So this discussion focuses on how evidence and partnerships for agri-food systems can inform the revised or the currently being revised gender action plan and make its implementation more transformative, particularly at national level. We're going to hear from policymakers who are in the room. We're going to hear from researchers and also negotiators and development practitioners who are working to ensure that gender equality and youth leadership are central to climate and agricultural policy. So to get the conversation started and to set the tone for this discussion, allow me to invite Dr. James Thalo, who is Director of Foresight and Policy Modeling Unit at the International Food Policy Research Institute. He's going to give his opening remarks titled, Using Gender Data to Strengthen National Implementation of the Gender Action Plan. You are welcome. Let's encourage him to come on stage.
No, thanks, Vivian. And it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm here representing a colleague of ours, Nicoline DeHaan, who's actually the director of our gender program in the CGIAR. So I'm a second best substitute. So I'm hoping I can do justice to both the gender action plan and also to some of the really exciting issues that we're going to be discussing in this side event. So as Vivian said, we're here to talk about women in the food system. And of course, we should start with the question, why are women so important in the food system? Why are women so important for climate change in the food system? And so the first thing we should acknowledge is that the food system is a lot more than just agriculture. Although Vivian and I come from the CGIAR, we recognize the food system goes well beyond just farming, right? It includes the food processing, the food trading, all of which make up the broader food system. And it turns out that women are heavily engaged in the food system, far more so than they are even in the rest of the economy, with maybe the exception of health and education. Women and the food system go hand in hand. We know that women in agriculture often tend to be subsistence farmers, and women working in the food system outside of agriculture often tend to, unfortunately, be more likely to be informal traders. And we know that subsistence farmers and informal traders are far less likely to have the kinds of assets and the access to finance that they need in order to cope with climate shocks when they happen, right? And so women in the food system are far more likely to be pushed into poverty and malnutrition when there is a climate shock, when they face climate risks. And so the Gender Action Plan is very much a response to this higher vulnerability of women in the broader economy, but also in the food system. If women are particularly vulnerable to climate change, then we need specific actions to address those vulnerabilities. Now, as I said, I'm here substituting for a real gender expert. I'm actually a macro development economist. So what do I know about gender? Well, when I read the Gender Action Plan, and it is a broad and comprehensive agenda, but there were two areas that really resonated with me from the position that I'm coming from. The first is the call, and I would say the first is on integration, and the second is on coherence. So the Gender Action Plan calls on us to better integrate gender into policy analysis, policy design, and policy implementation. And in order to achieve that, we're going to need to take on the agenda of mainstreaming gender throughout the policy process. And this is a shared agenda that I'm sure everyone here attending agrees with. But what we also know is that you don't achieve mainstreaming unless you invest in it, right? You have to invest intensively in making it happen. It doesn't come naturally. In the CGIAR, we had to create the gender platform and now the gender accelerator as a conscious effort to mainstream gender so that we can achieve that goal of integrating gender in all the research that we do in the CGIAR. So that's the integration goal. The second is around coherence, that we need to have better coherence between gender, climate, and broader development policies. And again, we know that this isn't going to happen unless we ourselves, working in the gender and policy space, reach out and work with a more diverse set of stakeholders, more people who have different perspectives. We know that gender is critical to achieving our climate goals, but others may be looking at other issues, may not necessarily agree with us. Often gender intentional programs cost more money, and it's up to us to show that those programs are more cost effective, that they are worth the additional investment. So the Gender Action Plan, it calls on us to be more intentional in our investments and our programming in the gender and climate space, but it also calls on us working in this space to reach out to others. So it's not just about attracting more money into our space, but it's about it's a responsibility of ours to go out and engage a broader audience. So the good news is that we have a wonderful set of panelists today who have experience in doing exactly this, working across the policy space, working in the research and international organization space to bring about the kinds of changes that the Gender Action Plan is calling on. So I'm going to hand back to Vivian, who's going to moderate the panelists, the panel discussion. Thanks, Vivian.
Thank you. Yes, let's appreciate James's input and thoughts into this discussion. And thank you so much for highlighting. And actually, you've given a very precise just analogy and also comparison of how and why the research needs to feed into the formulation of the Gender Action Plan. So thank you very much for that, and also for alluding to the areas of the Gender Action Plan, the various. I think Aina will tell us what parts of the Gender Action Plan that is, because you brought about a discussion on coherence, on integration, and there are still many other areas. So thank you so much for that. And before we move on to the panel, we do have one online speaker, and we thought that it might be good if we hear one country example on how they have downscaled or how they are working on the Gender Action Plan. So this particular country is Ethiopia, and Dr. Abonesh Tesfaye has been working with the Ethiopia team, and she is the ICRA, the Accelerating Impacts of Climate Change Gender Focal Point. She's been working in Ethiopia with that team that is based down there. So let's go online and let's listen to Dr. Abonesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. My name is Abonesh. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah, my name is Abonesh. I am from Ethiopia. Yeah. So hello. Hello, can you hear me? Vivian, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think I'm facing technical difficulties. I hear echo.
Apologies for that. Abonesh, coordination and also I think communication from here to Addis. And you'll agree it's a long way. So probably the connection is, but I will come back to her and we'll hear her experience. But for now, allow me to move to the panel so that we can continue the discussion and we'll still get to go back to Abonesh and hear more from her side. So with that, let me invite Ina Maria Iteta. Ina is a negotiator. She is from Namibia. And so she is one of the negotiators that are in the room negotiating the next iteration of the gender action plan. And she's going to be in conversation with Liva Agure, who is the Natural Resources Officer with FAO. And so we are going to just try to listen and hear from them about various experiences that they have had working on the gender action plan. So perhaps a framing question for all of them will be, how can evidence and policy practice from agri-food systems help shape a more transformative and implementable UNFCCC gender action plan at national level? And Aina, let's get started because you're the one in the negotiating room and you probably will tell us better what we need. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Vivian, and to our audience. It is a pleasure to be here and discussing the subject that is so critical. And of course, a passion at the same time, especially from the gender constituency. As the submission from the first presenter was really, really good and very strong, especially from a policy perspective, looking at the differentiated impact of gender between men and women, and also looking at the constituencies of women, how they contribute, especially to the food system. Undoubtedly, for Namibia, I would want to start with that 60% of our labor force in the agricultural sector is made up of women. And those are issues that we have to take along in terms of using the statistics and data to have our submission and argument when we are talking about differentiated impact of gender on climate change. Of course, it's raining. We need rain. It should rain. So hopefully we'll still understand each other. The fact that you have such submission already statistically from the researchers to say you need to find intervention. How do you support that 60% contributing critically to one of the backbone within the economy, and not just that, to one of the livelihood that affects more or less everybody? Because when they spend their time doing subsistence agricultural farming, contributing to the commercial farming, mostly especially with the hand picking, where you need to come in, have manual labor, you want to have intervention that would help them when they cannot pay attention to take time within their own crop field. What other mechanism can you help them with to adapt to climate change? So the issues of policies is very critical. And of course, we are not just talking about empowering women to be in positions, but you want them to be making impactful decision. Namibia, for example, I think we are pushing, and I think when it comes to the policy makers, we have set the trend globally. 57 of our cabinet is being championed by women as ministers. And one of the key ministry, which is the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Water, and Land Reform, that is quite a compacted ministry, very critical for the economy and for the subject we are talking about here, is being led by a woman and also deputized by a woman. So we are pushing these things to say, can definitely women equally contribute from a policy perspective? Of course, we have always had a narrative that says when you empower a woman, you have empowered the whole society and community. Of course, we would also want to see that being demonstrated from a research perspective to say, when we empower our women, what impactful and differentiated approach have they brought on board, especially when it comes to the agricultural sector, and that we have noted that women are contributing so meaningfully to that particular sector. So maybe for now, let me stop there, then I will continue.
Thank you, Aina. Indeed, showers of blessings. And I hope that gets us forward on the Gender Action Plan. Let's move on to Liva. And you have been nodding even as Aina has been sharing her submissions and sharing the example from Namibia. So perhaps from you, from your perspective, working for the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, how can evidence also help shape a more transformative gender action plan?
Well, thank you. And first of all, it's really an honor to be here in this panel today, represent FAO. As well as you already nicely set out, I think the setting was given, the background why agriculture matters, and then why we are speaking about gender in the agri-food systems. And then from the from the UN perspective, let me give some overviews of some of the studies that we have done in FAO, which highlights how gender is integrated in the national policies, but then also gives some guidance and also indication where the new gender action plan could be improved and strengthened, especially when we are speaking about the agri-food systems transformation and the climate change. So evidence indicates that agri-food systems components in the nationally determined contribution and the national adaptation plans do incorporate gender considerations. But as said, through these studies, we see that there are gaps and there is a potential for improvement, including through the gender action plan under the UNFCCC. So I will highlight some of the examples from 3 studies that we have done recently. First, I would like to speak about the nationally determined contributions. So we have done these analyses how the agriculture, agri-food systems, land use is featuring in the nationally determined contributions, and then also looking more deeper also how then the gender considerations are integrated in these targets. So the recent analysis that was launched earlier this year looked at agri-food system component of 167 nationally determined contributions submitted as of 1st of January 2024. And it found that a majority of the countries are aiming to address gender-based vulnerabilities in agri-food systems as part of their climate change responses. And when we dig deeper, it's about half of the countries include climate actions in agri-food systems that explicitly target the aim to benefit vulnerable groups, particularly through the adaptation efforts. And those are targeting then women. However, when we look at the more recent NDCs, as you know, this year, the 3rd round of the NDCs have been developed by the countries. So looking at the rapid analysis, only 17% of the NDCs reference the disproportionate impacts of climate change on women and agri-food systems, even though women make most of the task force for the agri-food, a majority part of the task force that is in, or labor that is involved in the agri-food system, they are more vulnerable to impacts of climate change, and also they have less access to the climate finance as well as innovation and technology on the ground. And then the third study that I would like to highlight, carried out by FAO and UNDP, and will be released later this week, is looking into how gender is represented in the national adaptation plans. And it's an almost universal acknowledgement of agri-food systems as areas of the climate risk, but limited recognition of the vulnerable groups, including the women in the agri-food systems. And then further 2/3 of the developing countries within the with the national adaptation plans reference gender as their adaptation actions. However, that only represents 3.8% of the total actions in the national adaptation plans related to the agri-food system. So it's a very small proportion that recognizes that. So what are these findings? What do these findings mean for the gender action plan? First is that the agri-food systems is a sector that is vastly represented in the national adaptation plans and also in the NDCs. So it also provides a great opportunity then to integrate the gender considerations on those. It's just that we as a community and at the national and international level will have to provide support and ensure that's done. And then through implementing the nationally NDCs and NAPs, countries recognize the gender actions, and that's also in line with the priority D of on the gender action plan. But at the same time, as said before, there is a space for improvement. So gender action plan is one of the key guiding principles and also a commitment from the countries that they will take the seriously of integrating gender into their national policies, in their climate considerations. And then looking at the agriculture component, as said, that provides an opportunity for us and also as a technical agencies and expertise, then also advise countries how to do it better through the agri-food systems. And with that, I think I've been also, yeah. So we, as FAO, I will share our experience later, but yeah, we've been happy to work with countries on these aspects.
Okay, great. Thank you, Liva, for sharing the examples from FAO's work and how actually you have looked at the NAPs, the NDCs, and just sort of telling us how we need to move forward in terms of the gap. So that's really appreciated. Let's give a round of applause, both Liva and Aina, as we move on to our next session, question. So we all know that the gap is being negotiated now. The drafting continues and parties will need to agree on the items that are being discussed. But coming back to you, Aina, of course, as a negotiator sitting in the negotiation room, what progress has been made under this UNFCCC gap? And are there any gaps and priorities that even as you work on the next version that we will need to focus on?
Thank you very much once again, Vivian. And of course, the negotiations are tough as they're supposed to be, I guess. But of course, we have been negotiating really in the good spirit, especially from parties and of course, respective groups. So we have been trying to reach and find common ground, which is always not easy because of different interests, of course, and different challenges that are facing different regions. It's inevitable, but of course, what is critical is to say, how do we meet each other halfway? And that is what negotiations are all about. So, of course, at this point in time, especially in the gender constituency, things has been a bit challenging in terms of reaching consensus. Basically, we are now in the second week of negotiation. And of course, we were given that extension for today and tomorrow to find common ground and have bilateral engagement from group. Of course, today we also had our IC, which we have managed to conclude around 1 o'clock. The expectations are quite in a different space because, of course, we worked from June with a text that was around about 24 pages. At this point in time, instead of shrinking that and reaching common ground, we have expanded the text to go to around about 35 pages. So that should tell you that, of course, while we are trying to find each other, there is still divergences in the group. And unfortunately, the situation is exactly as such. But of course, we have a good team, especially our co-facilitator. They are really trying to accommodate everybody's interest, each group's interest. At this point in time, the whole text is still blanketed. And of course, we continue now to hope that there would be a way out, because what is of critical importance for the GAP is for us to have an adopted GAP at this COP for the next 9 years. Unfortunately, it would be really not a favorable conclusion for us to leave Belém without a COP, without a GAP rather. And hence, at this point in time, our eyes are ready to hopefully that to the next level of negotiation, which would be now the COP presidency, we are hoping that there would be some leadership and the guidance to give us something to work with, that parties would also come to see each other's need and find common ground, so that the bigger issue is for us to have a GAP. So when it comes to issues of focus area, are we still okay?
Well, we are safe. I think some of you are being rained on, but it's good. We are fine.
All right. Yes, I just wanted to touch critically on the area of priorities. Why all priority areas are all important? But of course, we know there are those that are very, very critical. And I think the standing in director who set the tone have really also touched on those, the coherence issues and so forth. But of course, when we look at the capacity building issue, especially under priority area 1, knowledge is always a power. And we need to capacitate our negotiators more specifically on different issues, including not just for us to inquire and request climate finance. And I think that is really one of the critical areas. But we need to build capacity, especially to the gender focal point, in terms of accessing climate finance that should support the GAP. Because it's of no use to have a GAP and then we have provisions of finance in the GAP, but yet people have no capacity either to contribute to the programming initiative at national level or have broader information in terms of opening up GAP financing windows that many a time would come through the financing mechanism. Of course, more specifically for the AGN, the means of implementation, this is an open secret. We have been advocating for area priority D, implementation and means of implementation. In our previous or just ended GAP, we have learned it have not transformed much, especially on the ground. It's because of the limitation of accessibility of means of implementation. And this is both from the financial accessibility as well as technical assistance or support to respective parties. So at this point in time, of course, we have made our submission, especially on means of implementation. And there has been really good support also coming from other parties. We are just hoping that this GAP, one of the key different issues is that it would have means of implementation, else we would equally have the same document that we have. And mind you, this is 9 years ahead, and if there are no resources provided, we would be stuck in the same position. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aina. And indeed, means of implementation, that continues to be a sticky issue. You know, the access to technology, the finance, the capacity building, but specifically, I think the finances of the three is what is quite critical. So thank you so much for bringing that. Shortly, we'll go back online because Abonesh is back. So we will still go back to her in another 4 minutes probably, so that we can get her submissions. But for now, allow me to go back to Liva. And you have continued to work with governments on national climate policies, especially as, of course, as FAO. So what are some of the institutional and policy shifts that may have proven most effective in ensuring that gender is meaningfully integrated in national policy frameworks?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I will be sharing some examples that we've done at the national level. So first, let me start with the example from Africa, from Uganda, where through FAO joint program with UNDP called SCALA, we were working together with the government, and we supported the multi-ministerial group to unpack the agriculture components in the NDCs and in the NAPs. And then through this participatory research process, we identified the local vulnerabilities and the adaptation priorities, and then provided extensive support to enhance local planners to be able in their capacities to integrate gender and climate considerations in the subnational level action plans on the NAP implementation and the NDC implementation. And then further, we are now continue to explore the de-risking mechanisms and also possibilities to attract further investment for the implementation at the subnational level. And then this emphasis on the translating the national commitments at the local plans, and that also gives a local ownership. And then there's also a more, let's say, passion to implement then it at the local level if there's more ownership of these plans. So that strengthens the kind of capacities at from top to bottom across the government. The second example that I would like to share, and I really hope that our online speaker can join because she can speak more about this experience from her perspective. So this experience is from Asia, from Cambodia. So here FAO through another project also provided support to the Ministry of Environment, and they had established a gender mainstreaming action group in the ministry. And then through this group, there was a way embedded how to integrate gender consideration into the agriculture sector of Cambodia's third NDCs. So here we provided the capacity building and trainer of the trainers to the members of this group, and that also this capacity building was linking the considerations of the biodiversity and climate integration into the NDCs. So that is also then linked with the current Gender Action Plan Priority C, and it also provides then, of course, the linkages with the CBD and also with the UNFCCC and so here and then further, we were also providing support to the country negotiators to be able to engage and participate in these international fora. So that's also kind of how to link the international policies with their national policies as well. And then last but not least, there are a number of the case studies that we have compiled together with the Rome-based agencies that provides the evidence on the policies and how the gender is mainstream at the different policies. And I will a bit shorten to share details, but what we can learn from these case studies is that while at the global level, the considerations may appear similar, it's really this local ownership what makes the difference, because then we can see that if there is a local ownership and understanding why we need to consider all the vulnerable groups, including the women, then we can see that these policies are picked up and they are implemented more efficiently. So I will stop here.
Thank you. A round of applause for Liva. And Aina, of course. Aina, I'm not forgetting you. Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience? Maybe just one, because we need to go online. We are going to hear from one of the case studies from the work of CGIAR. We have the ICRAP project team. They have worked with the Ethiopia country office to be able to present the gender action plan. So do we have any question in the audience, or we can also come back? You can think about your questions, maybe one or two, and then once we hear from Abonesh, we can take the questions. So I think my panelists, maybe we can take our seats and then we'll come back and take questions. Thank you so much. Abonesh, you need to say, sorry. Abonesh, you need to say something.
I can hear you.
Online.
I can hear you.
You are live, so you may start your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So I will present the case of Ethiopia. As Vivian mentioned, we have prepared the Ethiopian Climate Change Gender Action Plan. So Ethiopian Climate Change Gender Action Plan, we prepared last year, and I start with the context why we prepared the Climate Change Gender Action Plan. So tell me if you are not, if you hear me. I hope you hear me, so I just proceed. So the climate crisis, as you all know, is not a gender neutral issue. So I start with the context, why we present or why we prepare the gender action plan. The climate crisis is not a gender neutral issue. It affects men and women differently. And this is due to the existing social, economic, and cultural inequalities. This is because in many societies, women are responsible for managing their food, water, and energy needs. And when the climate-related events disrupt food, water, and energy availability, women are responsible for traveling long distances to secure their families' needs, food needs, water needs, and energy needs. They're responsible to meet their families' basic needs. In addition, drought-related water scarcity can also severely affect hygiene and sanitation. And in this case, this makes women more vulnerable to the risk of waterborne diseases, especially during pregnancy and childbirth, and this contributes significantly to maternal and newborn diseases. And again, extreme events also can also lead to migration and displacement. And during these actions or during this process, women face the risk of violence and also trafficking, human trafficking, and this affects them much. So why do we need to integrate gender in climate action? There can be a number of reasons why we need to integrate gender in climate actions, but some of this may include, as we all know, half of the world population is women and girls. They represent half of the world population, so it's not fair to exclude women from these climate actions. So one reason is half of the world population is comprised of women, and we need to incorporate their voices while preparing climate action. That's one reason. The other reason is empowering women means better climate solutions. That means women make up also half of the agricultural labor force. So if we empower women, if we provide women with agricultural resources and agricultural inputs, we will gain more in terms of agricultural productivity. So this may be another reason why we need to incorporate gender in climate action. It also enhances the effectiveness of climate responses because women play a key role in building climate resilience in communities. And the other reason is also it helps to accelerate progress towards the Paris Agreement and also the Sustainable Development Goals. This may be some of the reasons why we need to integrate gender in climate action. So the main objective of the Climate Change Gender Action Plan is to address the intersection of climate change and gender inequality through gender-responsive strategies. And the specific objectives include to mainstream gender in climate policies, plans and programs to strengthen women's adaptive capacity through climate information, early warning system, and disaster risk reduction, and also to promote women's leadership in climate governance, to provide tailored support to address disproportionate impact of climate change, and also to mobilize climate finances, gender response climate finances. These are the specific objectives. And when we look at the contents of the Climate Change Gender Action Plan, the action plan we prepared contains of course, it contains the introductory or background section. It also has the objective, as I stated before. It also has a country context or country overview. It also has a policy framework supporting the gender and climate action. There is also a review section that shows the gender-responsive approaches to climate adaptation and mitigation. It also has the situation analysis section. And this Climate Change Gender Action Plan is prepared for 9 priority sectors, as stated in the nationally determined contribution of the country. And these 9 priority sectors are agriculture and food security, forest and biodiversity, water and energy, disaster risk reduction and climate services, health, education, urban infrastructure, transport, and industry. These are the 9 priority sectors the action plan is prepared. And the action plan contains the objective of or the activities and the actions, the indicators, responsible institutions, what we mean by responsible institutions is institutions that collaborate to carry out the activities or the objectives of the action plan, and specific targets are also set, budgets also estimated for the action plan, and also timeline is indicated for the action plan. So these are the contents of the action plan we prepared. So in the preparation of the action plan, we reviewed a number of documents, policy documents, and all the relevant documents have been reviewed for the preparation of the action plans, and some of these are indicated here. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the UNFCCC documents, the Convention of Biological Diversity, the International Conference on Population and Development, the Lima Work Program on Gender, the Beijing Platform for Action, and other documents that are relevant are reviewed while preparing the Climate Change Gender Action Plan. And the national documents or the national frameworks reviewed include the Ethiopian Constitution, the Ethiopian Climate Resilient Green Economy Document, the NDC, National Policy on Women, the Ethiopian Family Code, Labor Legislation, Civil Servants Proclamation, and the new Criminal Code. These are some of the national documents reviewed in the preparation of the action plan. And stakeholders consulted during the preparation of the action plan, and stakeholders were consulted in 3 rounds. And in the first round, Accra team and the Ministry of Planning and Development and the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs gathered together and discussed and drafted the very first draft of the action plan. And in the second round, in-depth discussion was conducted with the Ministry of Planning and Development. Officials and experts were consulted in improving the draft action plan. And in the final stage, the national validation workshop was conducted, and all sector ministries and international partners, the private sector, and the civil society were invited to provide their input and to improve the document. So these were the 3 stages of the preparation of the Climate Change Gender Action Plan. And the partners who contributed in the preparation of the action plan were indicated here. There are international organizations and national partners who significantly contributed in the preparation of the action plan. And this action plan was launched during the African Climate Summit that was conducted in Addis Ababa in September. So the document is now officially launched, and it's going to be just being practiced through the line ministries through those sector organizations. So this is the content of the action plan in the procedure we followed in the preparation of the action plan. Thank you.
Microphone is okay. We're back. Thank you, Abonesh, for that. I apologize for the rains, but we will avail Abonesh's presentation, and you can review it. It's actually rich, and she has attempted to explain the process that they went through in supporting Ethiopia to develop its own national gender action plan. So perhaps I should invite my panelists back on stage, including our opening speaker, so that we can take your questions and also wrap up this conversation. Do we have any questions from the audience? Maybe as we get the questions, I just want them to think of just perhaps one thought or one thing that you want to take away from this conversation. Just helping our audience to wrap it all up, because the rains were a bit disruptive and probably they couldn't get everything. So no questions, we are okay. We can move back to the panelists. Any one of you who feels ready? James.
I can kick us off. I think that there are two things that I heard from the panelists. The first is that thanks to these FAO studies, the good news is that food systems are in these climate policies. The bad news is gender is not represented well enough in those food system sections. So we've got our work cut out for us. And then the second is that gender policy negotiations are no different from any policy negotiations, that there are stumbling blocks, but it's great that so much effort is being put into this process. And it is so true that we need investment. If we want to see this actually materialize, we need to see investments. And so that is the first proof that this is a priority for the international community. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Let's appreciate James for that.
Thank you. So maybe from my side, on top of the importance for the investments and prioritizing gender at the national and subnational level, maybe looking at the negotiators, and I'm not sure whether that's something really we can tailor, but it's also looking really at these larger sectors, because of course the gender integration is across, but then also picking up on the evidence that both FAO, CGR, and other agencies working on the food and agriculture, picking up that evidence and using it, also these experiences, but also our expertise, how we can then also improve the implementation on the gender action plan. And I think that will also be then easier for the countries to report on it if we look also through these sector experiences.
Thank you, Liva. Let's appreciate her. Yes.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for this session, and especially to CJR, FAO. Definitely, we can have policies that will address the need of our community if they are not informed by research. That is a starting point for me, and really the two organizations, you are doing a great job, especially supporting the agricultural and food system sectors, and that we can talk about the gender action plan, not talking about issues of agriculture, technology that is aligned to make the livelihood of our people better and for them to adapt to climate change. And that linkage from research to policies to our farmers need to be strengthened. Further than that, we are hoping, of course, from the negotiation point of view, what is important is for us not to miss the opportunity to have the GAP adopted and making sure that we roll out this GAP. And I'm sure as parties, we are at different position when it comes to national GAP. It is also a call within this GAP to say countries that have not yet developed their national GAP. Namibia have just finalized ours with the support of UNDP, of course. And of course, I'm happy that Ethiopia have just presented a remarkable one, but there is still a number of countries that don't have national GAP and they need support. And it's critical that those national GAP positions are also aligned to the UNFCCC GAP. Together, then we are talking about issues of addressing the climate change and the inequality that is faced by the discrimination, of course, not really by nature, but of course, by virtue of how our communities are structured. Those barriers, we are only able to dismantle them when we can have a common position moving forward, hence the critical importance of the approval and adoption of this new GAP. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate her. Thank you so much. So I think with that, I'd like to bring this to a close, and I will help us also sum it all. So James opened by reminding us why this agenda matters, because women and youth are deeply engaged across food systems, far beyond agriculture, and yet they are among the most vulnerable to climate shocks because they work in subsistence and informal sectors with fewer assets and limited access to finance. She has actually reiterated on that aspect a lot. The Gender Action Plan is a response to this reality, calling for intentional evidence-driven actions and stronger coherence across gender, climate, and development policies. Then our speakers in the panel, including Abonesh, who was online, showed us what this looks like in practice, that evidence and gender disaggregated data helps countries to target the right groups. The national gaps, the NDCs, the national NDCs, national development, nationally determined contributions, thank you. Then the NAPs, integrating gender more systematically, and partnerships help us to be able to turn these commitments into implementation. So the takeaway is clear. To make this revised gender action plan truly transformative, we must design climate policies with gender goals at the center. We must strengthen institutional capacity, and we must work through diverse partnerships that reach women and youth who are also driving our food systems. So that's a quick summary for us. I hope it helps us. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to all the speakers. Apologies for the hiccups, but let's continue the conversation in the other meeting rooms.